welcome back here to Open. Daren Jaime here with you, and want to let you know that COVID-19 continues to make organizations have to deal with a whole lot of adjustments. And so one of those organizations we're pleased to have right here sharing with us, and we've got Jacqueline Ebanks. She's from the Commission on Gender Equity here in New York, and we're glad to have her here. She's also the executive director. And Jacqueline, good to have you.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Daren.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about your organization and the work that you do, first of all, and then we'll talk actually about how COVID-19 has definitely impacted you.
Yes. The Commission on Gender Equity is a commission within the Office of the Mayor. In the early days, in fact, in 2020, the Commission and the work of gender equity in New York City is celebrating 45 years. You may know of the Commission on the Status of Women. Well, we're the latest iteration, or the Commission on the Status of Women. And the Commission on Gender Equity is the latest iteration of that commission. Our work is to work across city agencies to dismantle institutional barriers to gender equity. How do we ensure that our city agencies help create a more equitable society and that individuals are not discriminated against based on gender? What does that mean for us? The commission has three principles within which we operate. First is that gender is diverse. And so our work really looks at the well-being of girls, women, transgender, and gender non-binary New Yorkers. Second is that we operate with an intersectional lens. That means as individuals, we bring multiple identities to the table, such as age, race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. Some of us are differently abled. All of those things impact how we work. And as we develop policies, we want to be mindful of these intersectional identities.
And so tell me a little bit about the intersectional identities, because when we talk about intersection, right, it's really just more than just we're talking about gender. There are a lot of other components that actually affect, and particularly with COVID-19, let's talk about how they're being affected.
Right. So what we look at in the commission, and let me tell you about what we consider the intersectional identities. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. We think about individuals who are differently abled. So we think about gender as it relates to differently abled individuals, as it relates to your race, as it relates to your age. Things happen to you differently as you age, right? As it relates to your socioeconomic status, i.e. your class, how wealthy you are, how not wealthy you are. There are really very different impacts there. What's your gender expression? And those are very things we're mindful of. Your faith creates another lens, right? And all that interplays with your gender. In the commission, when we do our work, we talk about three areas of focus: economic mobility and opportunity, 1, health and reproductive justice, 2, and 3, safety. And so not only are our identities intersectional, but also our issues. Those 3 issues are related. COVID-19 comes along, and we are hearing it's disproportionately impacting communities of color. And so we begin to look at that. How is it impacting girls? How is it impacting women? How is it impacting LGBTQ individuals and gender non-binary New Yorkers? And as we look at those issues, we see in terms of loss of jobs, economic mobility and opportunity, the vulnerabilities there, because we know that many of the jobs that have gone away are in the service and hospitality industry. And those are primarily occupied by women. We also know that 63% of the frontline workers in New York City are women. And therefore we know that not only are some of us losing jobs, but also some of us have been identified as essential workers, which means we're probably likely more exposed and needed to keep the city running, okay? So there's that stress. LGBTQ individuals who need services, largely in the health areas, we have seen delayed healthcare services because of COVID-19, interrupted healthcare services. And so many people have not been able to address ongoing needs because our system has had to address the emergency of COVID-19. We're very concerned about the vulnerabilities in our homes. We're asked to shelter in place. And some of our homes may be violent. And some of them, some family members may not be accepting of an LGBTQ youth or an LGBTQ family member. Incredible vulnerabilities there. We have seen calls that drop to 15% of the normal of calls into our hotline for domestic violence. We're greatly concerned what is happening in homes where these huge vulnerabilities are. So that's just a snapshot of what's happening across the gender lens within our three areas. We're
Right.
very, very mindful. And so as a city, we've mobilized around food. Hunger is another area, right? If people have lost their jobs, how can they feed themselves? And so we have many food stations and food distribution centers around New York City. So that's just, again, as I said, a snapshot of what's happening.
And so tell me a little bit about the town hall meeting, because I know you've got a town hall meeting coming up. And so that has been quite fruitful as well.
Right. So what we determined early on is that in planning for the recovery, we wanted to better understand what individuals were experiencing, regardless of gender identity, regardless of gender expression or background. And so we're holding a town hall on June 10th. And if you haven't registered yet, people can register still. It's June 10th, 2 to 3:30 p.m. and we'll send you the link. And we're going to be talking about gender equity and the COVID-19 recovery. New York City is now open, right? Phase 1. And so what does it mean? How are we going to transition from a space of vulnerability into a space of security as we move through the recovery? How do we ensure that regardless of gender identity and expression, everybody is able to find economic security and to really have autonomy over their reproductive lives, to gain access to quality health care? And then how do we ensure that our communities remain safe? So we want to have a discussion. There'll be a panel discussion first, and then we'll be opening for Q&A. But what's also important is at the end of that town hall, we're going to release a survey. And we would like New Yorkers ages 18 and above to respond to this survey. The link will be open from June 10th to July 6th. And we want everybody, men, women, girls, transgender, gender non-binary, 18 and above, to really tell us how they're experiencing life in COVID-19. And then as we plan for the recovery, every 4 months, we hope to send out this survey again so that we can really begin to understand what has changed over time. And really important to hear from everyone, especially in the Bronx. We have very low registration from the Bronx. I'm from the Bronx and I'm highly upset about that. So I'm hoping that people from the Bronx will really step up, and we need to make our voices heard. That's important. If you don't weigh in, we can't be aware of the issue. And if we don't know about the issue, we can't address it.
Well, I want to get your perspective here, because as we are talking about reopening, right, and we hear about talks of possibly New York getting into that phase 1 of reopening, what are some of your anticipations and what are some of your worries, given the fact that this is right around the corner?
The idea to still remain protected, right? Still listen to the orders, wash our hands. How disciplined will we be to keep our masks on? We want to minimize that possibility of a surge that people have talked about. So what we're looking for is how quickly are women getting back to work? How quickly are those hospitality jobs coming back online? How quickly can we get into the preventive services that we have missed? The immunizations for children have fallen some 60+% in this time. If you don't get our kids immunized from mumps, measles, rubella, what are the challenges we're going to face in the fall, right? Let's make sure those of us who need to take our flu vaccine when it comes out, let's do that, because the COVID-19 pandemic is still with us. We want to minimize the negative impact on our healthcare system. And I just have to give a shout out to all the frontline workers who have been with us and helped us remain open, and the healthcare workers who have really faced this pandemic, many of whom are women of color. We wouldn't be here and safe without them. So it's a lot to think about as we manage. I'm very concerned the fact that we know now that more men have died than women? How many of those men were attached to families? Are we now going to see an increase in vulnerabilities in families and single female headed households? There's so much to uncover. And I guess as government, we can't know about this unless people are telling us about it. And that's what the commission wants to ensure, that we're opening up channels of communication, and we intend to listen. And then we want to leverage the city's resources to be responsive to the challenges that community members face.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline Ebanks. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you for the great work that you're doing. We've got your information at the bottom of the screen, and hopefully we can get more Bronxites connected to be a part of that. I know you want the borough of the Bronx to be well represented.
Absolutely.
And that's why you're here on the show, and we got
Yes.
you.
Thank you so much. Have a good
No
one.
problem. All right,
Bye-bye.
Jacqueline. Bye-bye. Jacqueline Ebanks, our guest here on Open. Stay with us. We got more show coming up right after this.